Hello and welcome to County Talk. I'm your host, Drew Winchester. Today we're going to focus on the future of library service in the City of Venice. And joining me to discuss this topic today are Sarasota County Administrator Tom Harmer and Sarah Beth Kalajian, Director of Library Services for Sarasota County. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great. So, Tom, I wanted to start with you. The library is scheduled to close on January 30th. So I was hoping you might share some of your thoughts on the closure.
Sure. Just to start off, I think with a brief comment, I think it's really important to understand how difficult a decision this is for the county. We recognize how important the library is to Venice, and all of our libraries are throughout the county, and so we take it very seriously when you have to make a decision to close a library like that. We know it impacts the community. We know it inconveniences them. So we've tried to be as thoughtful as possible as we looked at what's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And our priority is and should be public health and safety as it relates to our patrons, as it relates to the volunteers, as it relates to our employees. And so we believe this is the right decision. It's important that we move forward and focus on the future.
Well, Sarah Beth, like I just mentioned, the library is scheduled to close on the 30th, but I think it would be beneficial if you gave us and gave the viewers some idea of how we got to this point.
Sure. In 2012, there were indications that there were increased humidity levels in a particular area of the library, and that led very quickly to a remediation, and we really we understood the value of that part of the library. It was the meeting room where lots and lots of programs occur. So we thought, okay, we've got that mastered and we're moving forward. Later in 2014, the same conditions seemed to reappear. First, of course, in that area, and then further testing showed that it had extended into other parts of the library.
So then, it's obviously something that has been ongoing for some time in terms of the work and the research that has been done to get us to this point. So what's the message then for the community with the library closing?
So as Mr. Harmer referenced, we just know this is a huge and significant action that we're taking, and we don't take lightly at all. It's been a really thoughtful, deliberate process, thinking of how it would impact the community. But then we really understand that we want to look forward and say, if this building is no longer serving us well, then we're going to start thinking about what's the next library service and how do we plan that and involve the community. The particular process that we went through was really in a variety of stages. We would do some testing, we would get the results of those tests, and we would begin to say what impact will that have and how costly will that be. And so that's a piece of a puzzle that you put together. Then the next test would reveal something else, and again there's another piece of the puzzle. And some of these contributed to the understanding that in a 50-plus-year-old building it may not be the right move to try and remediate the building.
Right. So there has been, I think, a sense in the community that this was done very hastily, that it was a decision that was made very quickly, but it sounds like that has been a very deliberate and measured process that has taken place over the course of a year or more.
It has, and we've involved the experts, the forensic, the environmental, the geological, the ecological, all of those folks who are doing their professional best testing and probing to see what the conditions are. And at the same time, you know, on my mind every single day are the committed volunteers and employees that we have who are in that building 8 to 10 hours a day, and then the patrons who are coming in. We did receive an indication that while the ranges were within a span that might not affect everyone, that there would be people who would have heightened sensitivities, and those are the people that we've already heard from who have said, I've planned to use another library. A very dedicated longtime volunteer contacted me to say, I regret to share with you that I'm going to volunteer at a different library. And her concern extended beyond her own personal health and well-being, but to say that we have young children and families entering parts of the library where the air quality she felt had really diminished.
So Tom, this sounds like a very complex situation. Is there something that you'd like to share about how that process played out and where we are now?
Well, and I think what's really important is what do we do knowing that we needed to close the library?
Mhm.
And so I think what the library department and the county has been doing, and it really is a team effort because I think Sarah Beth leads that for the county as the library director over all of our library system. But I know she's supported with our real estate department and a number of our facility staff and a number of other team members as we've looked at how do we move forward.
Mhm.
And so I think as you think about the next steps, and I know the community's heard some about this, we've talked about a kiosk in the Venice Community Center on the same site where the library is now so that we maintain a presence. And using the term kiosk may be underselling it a little bit in my mind because I know it's really gonna be staffed with a library employee. There's gonna be resources there, computer, et cetera, that they'll be able to help someone that comes in that's trying to get information or maybe want to figure out how they can check out a book. They'll be able to do some of that, and then they'll be able to pick up books there that are checked out when they are received from another library. And that staff will also be able to help and work with the community as they're trying to work through this process like we are on temporary locations for their meetings, et cetera. So it will be really a full staffed information center by the library and the county on site there during this transition. And I think that's really important to understand that we're never leaving that location generally overall during this process to work through a temporary larger location to address the need until we finalize plans for the replacement library.
Now, I know it's difficult to completely predict the future, but maybe we could talk a little bit about some of the next steps that are being taken once the kiosk is open. Sarah Beth, would it mirror the process that was sort of in place for the replacement of the Gulfgate Library? I do know that there was a temporary library that opened.
It was, and it will be a similar process, actually tailored though to the Venice community so that we can best meet their needs. We're looking diligently for that temporary location, and I've said this, I'll repeat it, we want to get it right. So in my mind, this deliberate, thoughtful approach is really the responsible approach. I think the worst thing we could do is select a site hastily and then find out that there's not enough parking or the access to the site is not adequate. So we're thoughtfully thinking that through. We have support from many departments. City of Venice representatives have assisted us as well. And so once we identify the site, then we have a plan for exactly how you go about moving the resources into that location.
Right. Tom, what's the step in between the opening of a temporary library and that process and actually getting to a permanent library? I imagine there's some considerable community outreach there.
Well, there's a lot of internal work that has to occur. We have our processes, we're the government, and so putting together and working with potential property owners or city property or other sites that we're considering, and what does that look like from a site criteria standpoint? What does that look like from potentially a lease standpoint? Is there a potential long-term, short-term option there? And it's been interesting, even in this early phases, we're receiving a lot of feedback, which is good because it tells us the interest in the library and the future of the library. But for instance, I've seen feedback where it says it better be on the island, and I've seen similar feedback that says it better not be on the island. And so that's normal in this stage of the process. So I know we're laying out, and Sarah Beth can talk a little bit about that, really starting in February, a process to engage the community and talk about what's going on with the transition, and then there'll be the longer term process as we go through the input process on ultimately the replacement. I would say one thing, the existing location is owned by the City of Venice, the land, and we have a land lease with the City of Venice, and we own the building. So it's a little unique. It's not county property, it's city property with a county building on it. And so there's been questions about what's the future of that property. At this point, it's all too premature. We don't know if we're going to rebuild on that site or not. We just know that current building is really not suited to be renovated easily into a new library. And so we want to do, as Sarah Beth said, go through this incremental, thoughtful process to end up with something that meets everyone's needs as best as possible.
So obviously a lot of moving parts for the particular situation. Now, Sarah Beth, in looking forward to these community conversations and this public outreach, what's going to be the most important part of that for you?
Well, it's actually an exciting prospect because the folks who have used the library for decades are going to be able to come and tell us, what do you think was the priority for you in terms of services? What do you think we got right at the current Venice Public Library? What do you think you'd like to see change? And once we get that feedback, then that starts to inform us as we design the library services.
So it's an exciting time for the future of library service in the city of Venice then.
We're going to rely on the community members who love this library to come and tell us and to help us dream about the next service.
Great. Well, that's all great information. Thank you for joining me today. I think that's some valuable information for the community. And thank you for joining me today and watching County Talk. For more information, just visit our website at scgov.net or call our contact center at 861-5000. Once again, I'm Drew Winchester, and this has been County Talk.